Welcome to the Feng Shui Mastery Show, where this session we're going to be looking at the Feng Shui of hotels, looking at an array of hotels that I've been staying at recently, within the last 6 months, in and around the world. So it makes for a fascinating insight into the various principles that are being used right across the world and what works and what doesn't work. So here we are looking at a feature which is very prominent in some of the hotels in the Mediterranean. And I had the good fortune of staying in this hotel where in Cyprus, where the primary emphasis appeared to be pots, lots and lots of pots, and they had nothing in them. And this feature I began to notice, and here you can see it more and more, which really is in stark contrast not only to the space around the pots, but also to the architecture above and which borders the pots. And they appear to be very strategically placed. There's nothing in the pots at all. And when I start to see an awful lot of them in and around this particular hotel, I began to see that there was a great significance in these pots being empty. It's almost like it's a vessel, and it's open to being receptive, that it's not overflowing with plants or anything else or water, that they were actually all about space. And you can see this whole hotel, it has a clever use of the space that it has been afforded, with various curvatures throughout, not just this corridor, but as you go into the other rooms. And the emphasis was on curves, and even on the floor there you can see the emphasis on the circle. And you may want to ask yourself, when you see a lot of curves, how does that resonate with yourself inside? How does that make you feel, say, and then if you compared it to something that was a lot more straight and square like, that actually demands a different kind of response from you. So this was one of the important ideas that I had picked up from travelling, was the use of pots. And this is not just in Cyprus, but right across all the hotels that I actually stayed in. So it's just emphasising some of the roundedness of the features of that ceiling. So here we are now in a hotel in Broome, Western Australia. Once again, the emphasis around this hotel was also pots, but we can see here that with it being the entrance, that there is something occupying the pots, as well as the deliberate Chinese figures guarding the doors. And this was an amazing hotel, because as soon as I walked in, I could tell that somebody was very au fait with the Chinese principles of Feng Shui. Actually a fantastic designed hotel, because of the features in it. We'll see more of that later on. Here, going back to the hotel in Cyprus, we saw that this was also a very prominent feature throughout all the hotels that I stayed in Cyprus, and that was the idea of water and how to shape the water, the momentum of it flowing. Some was much faster than others were more circular, others were more dynamic in movement, others were far more still. And it was a fascinating insight into how playing with water, we know water is synonymous with wealth and also health, but the importance of it flowing and how it flows and the sounds that they make when they are flowing. Back in Old Blighty here, this is a hotel I stayed in. It called itself an exclusive Berkshire hotel, so it's set amongst a lot of exclusive private residential housing, in probably one of the most affluent boroughs of the country. And once again, another play on water. This feature was quite a distance from the hotel, but once again a very, very well manicured garden with all kinds of textures and designs which use the backdrop of the space around it, and then this prominent water feature. And you'll find that a lot of these hotels now in England, a lot of them were once exclusive private estates belonging to the lords and ladies of the manor. And a lot of these estates were well endowed with water features up and down the country, not just down in London or outside London, up and down the country. And it is believed that a lot of these water features, the ideas for that came from when historically the ancestors of these people who own these properties would go to Europe and the Far East, and this is what they learned about how to create a fountain. And because it was such a prominent aspect to Chinese, Japanese, Far Eastern cultures, that they brought them back from Europe as well, Rome and Italy, parts of Italy and France, Versailles, and they set them up in these exclusive estates throughout England. There's very few public fountains up and down the country in the UK, primarily because they're also seen as places where people can collect and come together, and that's an action that's not too prominent in the culture of the country, coming together, usually to debate or protest. So you'll find most of these fountains are found in private residences, and interestingly, a lot of them have also gone dry. It's almost like the wealth has dried up. And if you look at the reflection of the Empire days, that in many ways a lot of these exclusive estates have been now turned into hotels and entertainment channels because they need the income to actually maintain the intense care and attention that these kind of buildings and gardens do require. And they no longer have the sources of income coming from abroad, so they rely upon a tourist trade. So, but in this particular instance, this is being used as a hotel, but you can tell that it was a private residence somewhere along the line, historically speaking. This also was a private residence, the Beaumont in Old Windsor. It's set in the most delightful of grounds, was an old school, the beginning of the 20th century, and it's got its own chapel, but it's really got an exquisite entrance as well. Great play with the flowers, colours, very uplifting. Here we have a really great display of vases at the front. They're not straight, they're actually flowing, and that continues on that theme into the main entrance. But you can see the colours of the trees. It's actually just a great invitation to move on in where the reception lies, just through those doors. Here we have a hotel on a tea plantation in Kerala, and this was the honeymoon suite, but it's quite interesting to have this circular form of geometrical piece of architecture. You don't often see this kind of shape unless you're looking at some of the Mongolian yurts, but these were very poignant because they were scattered gently throughout the tea plantation estate and really complemented the colour of the green tea plantations against the terracotta roofs and the white plaster of the building. So they really stood out, and the features were very prominent, and a very beautiful ambience because of the greenery surrounding it. So you may want to ask yourself, when you're in a round building, how does that make you feel compared to a square? How would it feel to you? So it's quite an interesting principle of having a spherical residence, and all of these were greeted with lights around them, and they certainly were attractive with the backdrop of the greenery. Once again, this comes back to this same hotel, the Tea Plantation Hotel, and once again we began to notice the prominence of these large pots. It's almost like saying these pots are saying something, and at first you don't quite know what they're saying, but there is an emptiness to them. This pot's got a lid on it, so it's almost like, conserving, a feeling of conserving whatever is in it, whether that's space or actual things. So, but it featured very dramatically. It's a very dramatic statement, especially when it is at the front of the reception of this particular hotel. Then we move on to a very interesting abode, and here we have a houseboat. And these houseboats are very prominent features in two main areas within India. One is Kerala, and the other is in Kashmir. I've been to both. The houseboats in Kashmir are a lot more decorated in a very Victorian manner. Whether they're still like that or not, I don't know, because that was 20 years ago. This is more recent. Um, they they tend to be a little bit shabby inside, I thought. The decor needs to be a little bit more contemporary. Um, but nevertheless, the energy, the vibrational energy of the houseboat was one of excitement, and because also it was passing an awful lot of palm trees everywhere. And what we've got, the backdrop is a church, a huge prominence of white predominantly Catholic churches throughout this particular part of India, Kerala, and they appear to be very newly built, and the decor and the quality of these buildings is a rarity in terms of their modernity and also um, their contemporariness, really. So quite an interesting backdrop against the houseboat. But once again, even if the environment is on the water, you know, you still have an energy within that space. So it's about looking at the smells, it's about looking at the colours, it's about looking at the sounds, and ensuring that they also have a vibration which is calibrating with your own energy and that it makes you feel good. Once again, coming back to the Chinese hotel in Broome in Western Australia, um, these pots were positioned outside a spa and they had water bubbling out of them. So here we have not space in the pots, not any forms in the pots, but we've got water. So we've got space, we've got the pots, and we've got the water. And once again, water has a healing, it's not just associated with wealth, it has a healing quality to it. So you've got the sounds and the kinesthetic aspects of water, and then the grandiosity of the pots. So can you imagine how one feels when one is starting to enter the spa, starting to heal, starting to have space? And these are the two qualities that one would want to be attracted to in terms of relaxing and calming down. So the insignificance of 3. So then we start getting into the whole concept of numbers. So the first number is manifestation of something. The second is about duality, which is the world we live in, where everything is the opposite to the other. And then we have the 3, and 3 is about stabilization. It's like the 3-legged stool. You have stabilization of a concept. So you have the first one, which is not particularly steady, then the 2, and then the 3, which gives it a balance. So it's a very large statement here, and somebody obviously knows the effects that we want to pull on people. So the world is measured in space. So what is the space inside the pots and around it, and not the pots themselves? So it gets you to look at You can see the space behind the pots where the squares are cut out. So there's all kinds of dynamics going on when the eye is pulled to the pot and then pulled to the space in the squares behind. And squares also have a different effect upon you as opposed to the curves. Remember, we were looking at the curves before in the architecture of this Cyprus hotel. This is this Chinese feng shui hotel again. Once again, very prominent red. They've got the dragons at the front, which is all about protection, and you've got the red dynamism leading in through the front door. And when you get to that front door, you've got two large figures guarding it. So it's full of feng shui imagery, ideas, concepts, lots of green, lots of water at the front as well, where and there is actually an elephant there. So when you've got anything like an elephant is trying to solidify or make stable one idea or one concept around that area. So you might have an elephant with water, so you're stabilizing the water element coming through. So there's a lot of esoteric knowledge going on around all this design. You've got the square there of the red framing the entrance to the eye, and then as you go through, you're greeted with a lot of different colours. But as you go through the hotel, the road is winding. It's not so straight as this, and you have a clever use of the pots, a clever use of the plants and the textures, and so on. So here's those features, sculptures guarding the front entrance. Come back to here we have on the other part and directly on the other side of the world. This is London City, literally the city. This is the financial district. An amazing hotel here opposite St Paul's Cathedral, and we look at the colours. They're almost the similar colours to the one in Australia. That red dynamism, red being the dynamic activating colour, and then you've got the green growing out of that. Green once again to do with wealth, wood growing, so it's all positive and it attracts the eye. Now moving on, this is a real photograph, so if you think, wow, do we really get blue skies in England? Yes we do, and here this is the evidence. But what amazing backdrop with a cutout. It looks like a cutout, but this is for real, and this is where the Hammer House of Horror films and series was filmed. But when you get up closer, you don't realise that actually, you know, the architecture of this building is fascinating. It's got lots of gurgoys and a play. There's a play on a lot of the creatures, and when you look closer you can see things aren't as perfect as they appear to be, and you get this all at the front entrance, and it's a fascinating piece of architecture because it's got so much detail in it. And whilst there appears not to be the symmetry, but when you take a step back, you know, there is a symmetry running right throughout the building. Once again, these are the kind of fountains you'll see throughout the large estates, not just in England but in France and Italy, Spain. These are the symbols of wealth. Remember that all these countries have gone out and conquered other parts of the world and come back with the booty, so to speak, and have copied the ideas, and a lot of those ideas were associated with water, wealth, health, well-being. Unfortunately, the ones in England seem to have gone dry. Here's a hotel stayed at in the coast in India. They had an infinity pool, and this hotel had a beautiful vibration to it, and this was their feature. They had looked after it reasonably well, and the entrance to this hotel was populated with various Buddha and Hindu symbols, but the flow seemed to kind of come through from the entrance to the restaurant and then out to the pool. So very well done, really, and this was a 5-star hotel. So let's end there on infinity. So that's my 14 slides around the world, looking at the feng shui principles of various hotels and how they affect us internally.